What is the best cage situation for your rabbits? That's what we're talking about today. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you're new to our channel, we teach you how to raise your own meat, grow your own food, do all that in your backyard, and then we take you into the kitchen, we give you some recipes, we demonstrate them, and we show you how to make it into something phenomenal. Okay, so a question I get asked when everyone starts talking to me about rabbits and raising their own rabbits, what's the best cage situation? Okay, well that's a very loaded question, right? It depends on how many rabbits you're going to do. Is it going to be for just you, or are you going to build it out and make a bunch of rabbits? Is it short term or long term? What kind of capital investment do you want to make on getting started? Do you want to just buy it already done, or do you want to build it yourself? So that's, again, there's a lot of things you need to consider. So we got to start off with talking about probably the most simplest, which would be buying your own stuff. If you buy everything already made, it's going to be more expensive, but it's going to be plug and play, ready to go. Not much you have to do. You don't have to be much of a handyman, and so that'd probably be the easiest. The next thing would be a hutch. Okay, typically, so this is a hutch that I built. I think you could probably build that for, if I recall, I think it's under $100. All the wood you need going to be in standard lengths, so like 8-foot studs. You got to remember, any kind of hardware cloth or chicken wire, anything like you buy like that, is going to probably come in standard widths of like 48 inches or something a little bit bigger than that, and it rolls out to whatever length you want. Okay, if you do that, it's a pretty simple deal. You're building an elevated hutch with this wood. Use screws, not nails, by the way, because nails will come out at some point. Screws kind of hold everything together. It's a very simple thing. I can go over how to do it. A lot of people on YouTube can show you how to do a pretty standard hutch. Some of the problems you got to think about that, though, is wood. Okay, between the rabbits chewing on wood, they'll chew on wood. There's nothing you can do about that. So firstly, buy untreated wood, because you don't want them gnawing on that and then getting in their system. But they will chew on the wood, and it'll slowly deteriorate your hutch, and you're going to have to replace different components over time. Two, when it rains, because this is going to be outside, right? When it rains, wood kind of soaks in rain, and over time it weathers, it shrinks, or it'll expand, and that'll make your doors crooked, or they won't swing the same way over time. And then the urine, when the rabbits pee, they like to pee in the same spot. It's never right in the middle on the hardware cloth down to the bottom. It's usually along one of the sides, and it goes all over the wood. So if you do something like that, that's just something you have to consider. Okay, but it's a perfectly fine housing for your rabbits. You just got to make sure you put it in a shaded area. You can put a cover over it like I do. And typically when I know it's going to rain, I pull that over just to kind of keep them from getting rained on. I used to have a roof on it with some of that corrugated stuff to kind of get the rain off of them. But right now I just have plywood across the top, and then I pull a tarp over it when I know it's going to rain. But this stays in the shade at all times. Nothing wrong with the situation, but typically it'll give you 1, 2, 3 spots. So if you're starting out with a trio, you have a buck and 2 females, and then this serves you just fine. And when the babies get big enough and they're not feeding off mom anymore and they're eating pellets, then you can move just the babies out to a grow out cage, and we'll go over that later. Okay, so the next thing you could do, and really it has more longevity, is you build your own cages out of these wires. Okay, and I forget what side I have to point to, but I have something in there on how to make your own cages with the wire. Okay, that's a little bit more pricey to do, but it's got more longevity. Okay, because there's first of all, they can't really chew on the metal. They try, but it doesn't do anything for them, and you don't use any wood. So that again, that lasts longer. It's worth the extra money in my mind. So then it's just a matter of how you're going to arrange those metal cages. Okay, so you can stack them like I've done here, and a lot of times, people will put these trays. They'll catch all the pee and the poop, all that kind of stuff. But what I've found, this again, I've gone through several iterations, and this is one of my iterations. Okay, where you build like a wood frame to kind of just stack everything on, but these cages are not connected to the wood. they can slide in and out. So if I need to clean them, if I need to pull them out to replace the cage, or to move these rabbits without taking them out of the cage, that can all be done because they're sitting in these cages that are just resting on the wood. Now, when they get excited, they'll run around in the morning, especially when they see you coming out to feed them, and they get all excited, and they'll run little sprints and circles, and that's enough to kind of scoot this thing out. And if you go away for a weekend or something, there's a danger of them doing that over and over, and it'll slide and it can fall off. So I put little nails here just to stop it from sliding, but I can just bend those over and then pick it up and move it out, and that works just fine. Now, the benefit to this is you're going to really use this in if you have a space constraint, right? So you want to keep them enclosed, so you have them inside of a shed or garage or something like that, but you know, you don't have a lot of space, so you can stack them. So there, I have 2 high right here, and these trays. Now, a lot of people keep the trays, they'll slide the trays out, they'll do all that. That becomes a lot of work, I've found. So I slanted the trays, and then I put like a gutter system, and basically every day I just get a shovel and I scrape it into a bucket at the end, but all the urine, it just happens by itself. So that's good. Then you take the bucket, you dump that out every day, and it kind of works just fine. The problem with this is, though, it's only if you really have a space constraint and there's not a lot of airflow. So if it's enclosed in here, that's not a big deal. You know, I close the door, I put in a temporary cooler in here, and I keep the temperature down in here. So it's not that bad, but there's not a lot of circulation, so I have a lot of box fans going. I turned them off so you can hear me right now, but there's a lot of airflow that you have to kind of force because it's against the wall on that side, they're up against each other, then you have the thing on the bottom, so there's just not a lot of natural airflow. So I don't love this situation. You know, as I get more space, I am moving more and more away from this. So any enclosures I build after this have been an enclosure in and of itself, but I still use the metal cages, and we'll go through that now. Okay, so this is the current setup I have, and I'll go through the dimensions and all that. I just want to kind of talk about it while we're inside right now. This is a completely enclosed cage that I built only for rabbits. Okay, so now I started with not being enclosed. Okay, so it had a roof, it had all the things, chicken wire, so it was a protective enclosure, but had a lot of airflow, which was great in moderate weather. As we got into the summer, especially this summer in Texas, the temperatures have just been horrible, triple digits pretty consistently, which is just miserable. So beyond the breeding and the sterility and all that, it's just it's uncomfortable, and a lot of times it's too much for the rabbits to handle. So what I've done is I did enclose it. I got some plywood, I enclosed everything, and then I put a window unit over there. So I have it set at 78, so it kicks on, it's running all day, and usually at night it shuts off because it does stay cool enough in here that you know, it's in the high 70s. Not overly comfortable, but it's certainly more survivable for the rabbits. It puts them in a situation where they're not going to, you know, have to worry about dying. So, but the way this enclosure works, again, it evolved. Okay, it started off as an idea, and then I've had to sort of band-aid it. So my next enclosure will be an improvement on that, so that I won't have the same issues I'm having in this one. So even this, I would say, is not the best, but it's pretty good. So in this situation, I've kind of taken what we talked about, the metal cages, and I built a stand to kind of, you know, elevate them from the ground, and I have a whole run over here of 6 cages, and on the other side I have 6 cages over here. That way I can run the automatic watering system to them, and I can just go down the line every morning and feed, you know, boom, 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 feed them all. It's very efficient, very good. Now, I'll go over building this enclosure because the next one I'm going to build is going to be very similar, but it's going to be purposefully enclosed with insulation and everything like that, so I can actually maintain good temperatures year-round, and I can breed year-round in that enclosure. This one, it still gets too warm in here. I don't think I'm going to continue to breed when it's this hot in here. Again, it's upper 70s, so it's doable, but it's not ideal. Okay, but for the things that have worked, let's go over that. So firstly, I dug this down into the ground to kind of try and get some of the cooler temperatures that are in the ground. Okay, so the lower you go, you're going to get closer to like a 65-degree temperature. If you ever go to those caves, visit any of those caverns and things like that, you'll notice it's like year-round, doesn't matter what time of year it is, it's the same temperature. It's a nice, cool, like, you know, in the 60s type of temperature. It's very comfortable, okay? You're not going to get that by digging down, or you're certainly not going to get, you know, dig down that deep. But if you just dig, you know, a couple feet down for the whole enclosure to start, it keeps the lower temperatures at the ground level. What that also means is if you don't seal it, it's going to be like a basement situation on the East Coast, okay? Every time it rains, depending on where your water table is, you're going to have seepage come in here and it can flood it. So you either need to deal with that, or you need to have a pump or some mechanism of keeping the water out, or you're going to have that situation happen when you get a big rainfall, okay? Now, as far as how I did this, so I dug down, and then around the perimeter, I actually formed up a footing, and I mixed concrete by hand, and I made a footing, and then I built the first, I guess 3 feet of this up using the, you know, the CMU block that you get at Home Depot for, like, you know, what, $2 a block or something like that. So you get that block. I'm not a mason, so it's not an expert job, but you can kind of, you do good enough that you get basically a perimeter of the CMU block all the way around. And then from there, I framed up, you know, wooden walls with wooden frame all the way around. And for this particular enclosure, I put the netting in so that it was going to be, you know, a protective measure. And then for the roof, I started off with like the plastic for green roof, like a greenhouse type of roofing, but it's like a magnifying glass. It brings heat in and it traps heat in, and unless you have some sort of way of exhausting that heat, it just gets too hot. So I put plywood on the roofs to now, you know, block the direct heat, but I left a little bit of strips to keep some natural lighting in here, although that is sort of, you know, compromising because it does get pretty warm in here because of that. But you do have good light in here, and when you do that, you can have an herb garden or something like that, depending on how much light you're getting in here. But the temperature is decent in here. Like I said, a little warm, but that's going to be solved next time by purposefully insulating the walls, putting in a roof that doesn't let any light in, and then I'll just have to put some you know, fake lighting in here. So one thing to note is, so for the flooring, okay, anytime you have a tray, flooring, anything, all of your poop, your excrement, or your urine, that's all going to come out of the bottom. That's where they're gonna just drop everything. Usually in the same spot of the cage too, so it'll kind of still pile up. Okay, you can do the. I started off with hay or cedar chips or any of that kind of stuff, and yeah, you can throw it in your compost, but that ends up being a lot of work, and it does a couple things. One, everything sits in that hay. So when the urine goes on top of the poop, it keeps everything soggy. Then you have a smell issue, you have flies, you have all the things that you really don't want, especially around your animals, especially around your babies when they start getting born, because it breeds sickness and illness and death and just terrible things, and it stinks, so it's not fun. So what I found is, and I do this with my chickens too and my quail, if you have sand, if you have a thick enough layer of sand, then the urine just kind of falls through and it soaks through and it goes into that lower layer of sand, and the poop stays on top. So then you can just get a rake and you rake it out, and you can either shovel it out and you'll get some sand with it, or you can get like one of those kitty litter type of scoops that have like a sieve on it, and you can just sieve it out, and that goes into your compost or directly into your garden because it's all cold manured, right? Cold, yeah. And the urine goes into the sand, and by the time you would think, oh, it's going to build up. No, it'll evaporate and it's gone. And so you don't have the flies, you don't have the smell, you don't have any of that, and it's easy cleanup for the poop. So the sand, in order for that to really be true, you got to have a thick enough layer of sand. So I think probably in here I could dig it out, but I'm going to say it's probably about 6 inches worth of sand. That's a ton of sand. So it's an initial investment of doing that and spreading it all out, but because of that, you'll pack it down, and like I said, the poop stays on top, the urine goes beneath, keeps everything dry, easy cleanup, you're good to go. Now you'll notice I liked the idea of there being draft, but it was just too hot and I needed to cool that air, and so I was working against myself. So when I did put this up, I did put windows on it, so I could come over here And I'll pull these down. See, and that happens all the way around on all 4 sides. So I can pull that down, so when it gets cooler in the fall, I'll turn the AC off, I'll fold those windows down, and I'll rely on that through air to kind of cool the space. But right now it's too hot, or if it's gonna rain or something, I wanna close these up. And I keep it like that, okay? So this makes it a little bit more of a versatile type of enclosure, but it's limiting because it's not insulated. Okay, so this is my most recent enclosure that I built. It's about 9.5 feet by 17.5 feet. Now that's outside dimensions along the outside of the CMU block wall. You're gonna be framing up your walls in the middle of the block width, which is about 8 inches. So yeah, you can give up 4 inches on either side of that dimension for all the way around. These are nominal dimensions, by the way. One thing you do have to consider when you're enclosing everything is, because of the poor ventilation and you're moving air around within that space, a lot of dander and all the shedded hair from the rabbits, it's going to constantly get circulated. It's going to clog up your filters. It's going to get on the outside of your box fans. So you have to clean all that up, and it's going to settle on your cages as well. So there's some cleanup involved because of the poor circulation. Now for grow out cages, like I said, really at this point, they're babies, but they're big enough. They're probably about 4 to 6 weeks old. They've stopped, they've been weaned. They're not drinking mama's milk anymore. They're eating all of her pellets. So at that point, they can free feed, they can be on their own. So you put them in these grow out pens. These very easy to make. I think it takes 6 8-foot studs, a roll of hardware cloth, and then I think a piece of 4x8 plywood. You can cut and make 2 of these, right? So very cheap, very simple. You do these, you can put a whole grow out litter or 2 in these. Get like a dozen in here, and you're putting them on a free feeder, and they're just eating pellets constantly. You can move them around if you want, and they can eat all the grass that's kind of sticking up from underneath. But if you do that, it gives them somewhere to kind of grow out for the next several weeks. And again, hopefully, if you don't have too much heat and they're growing at a normal rate, 10 to 12 weeks, you're gonna be able to harvest them, and then it served its purpose. So something I want you guys to see about these grow out pens, because again, they're very simple. They serve a very limited and time limited function, but if you see, you can grab a few, and they're in here until they get old enough, okay? Now, I make these things, you can make them with a regular Home Depot bucket. Cut out the bottom, and you see, watch out guys. You see, there's a hole right there, so as they eat it, it kind of pours in. So you can load almost a full 50-pound bag, that's not true, probably about half of one, to fill it up. And they'll eat, and it'll slowly fill up at the bottom, and they just munch, munch, munch. That way they grow as fast as they can. So the grow out cages seem to be the most trivial when you're thinking about your permanent structures and things you're building. But you have to remember, I mean, you want to give these animals the best quality of life you can while they're alive. And so I like the idea of the grow out cages because it's a lot of space for them to kind of run around, and they can kind of move. Although they tend to stick together and dogpile into one corner anyway. But I like the idea of it being a little bit more space for them. So just psychologically for me, it's probably better. But something you got to think of, if it's right on the ground, there's a benefit, like, oh, they can eat the grass and all that. But if they're in there for too long, too many weeks in a row, their poop has nowhere to go. So it's just going to pile up on the bottom, it's going to start to cake, and they're going to run on top of it, and that's just bad stuff. So if you're not moving it often, like daily, then you need to elevate that, which isn't hard to do, but you got to pick one or the other. If you're going to elevate it, then fine, and then you just have to clean out underneath it every so many weeks when it starts to get too much, because then you will start to see it has nowhere to go. It'll get wet, it'll cause flies, and they're in close proximity to it because it's not that elevated. But if it's on the ground, it's going to happen very fast, like in a few days. So you probably need to rotate it, move it to different parts of the yard. Now for me, I like to have like an automatic watering system, so I like it to be stationary. And so any kind of grass you're going to get is probably going to be like hay or something I throw in there. It's not going to be from the undergrowth in that area. So I do elevate mine, not much, but enough. And then every time I harvest, I clean out from beneath that cage and I put it back. So I've seen a lot of different people, whether getting new bloodlines for my breeders, or just picking up other rabbits for whatever reason or dropping them off. And I've seen a number of different setups for people, and they all work for those people. So it doesn't have to be what I have. That hutch was a great way to go. That's how I started for the first year or so with those type of hutches. But then I just got tired of the wood constantly getting chewed on, having to replace it, and even the wood you're replacing, it's half gone because it's been chewed, it's been peed on, and it's kind of gross, to be honest. So it's a good spot as a temporary place for me, but I don't really use those as permanent caging anymore because I just have so many rabbits. Appreciate also, I started off for consumption for my family, so I didn't have a lot. And then over time, I've grown this into basically a micro farm, and I supply restaurants now, so I have a lot of rabbits now. So I have to develop a more efficient means of keeping track of them and labeling the cages so I can know when bunnies are due, when it's time to harvest, when to rotate them and move them around. So the metal caging worked out better for me because long term they have more longevity and they last longer because they're not getting chewed on, not getting they don't deteriorate as quickly, but it's more expensive to build those cages. If you hung on for that whole video, I appreciate you very much. Hopefully it was useful information. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe. It helps us out. And come up with any ideas you want for additional videos. The next series I'll probably do is starting your own business so that you can see how to make money off of raising rabbits. But if nothing else, God bless.